What began as a simple stress-relieving hobby had evolved into a complex ecosystem that Marcus had meticulously designed. Each plant variety was selected not just for flavor, but for compatibility with its neighbors. Companion planting, he explained to anyone who showed interest, was an ancient practice that modern science was only beginning to understand. Marigolds bordered his tomato plants, naturally repelling nematodes and other pests. Nasturtiums attracted aphids away from his kale, acting as living sacrificial decoys. The small garden shed at the corner of his yard housed a weather station connected to his smartphone, allowing him to track microclimate patterns with scientific precision. Next to his gardening tools hung detailed charts tracking germination rates, growth patterns, and yield quantities for each plant variety. Some neighbors joked that Marcus's garden had better documentation than their children's medical records. Last spring, when the city had faced water restrictions during a brief drought, Marcus had unveiled his rainwater collection system, 4 artfully disguised barrels connected to his home's gutters, storing enough water to sustain his garden through 3 rainless weeks. The HOA had initially objected until Marcus presented research showing how his system reduced runoff into the neighborhood's problematic drainage areas. Gardening isn't just about growing food, Marcus often told visitors who admired his perfectly maintained beds. It's about relationship with the land. Everything we take, we must give back. This philosophy explained the 3-bin composting system hidden behind trellises of flowering jasmine, where kitchen scraps and garden waste transformed into rich, black soil that smelled of fertility and promise. Patricia observed these interactions with mounting frustration. Her husband, Charles, a corporate attorney who spent most weekends golfing, had long ago learned to nod without listening when she complained about neighborhood infractions. "Can't you see what's happening?" she demanded one evening, pointing through their dining room window at Marcus's yard, where several neighbors had gathered to admire a particularly successful watermelon vine. "He's turning this neighborhood into a commune. Property values will plummet if everyone starts growing food like farmers." Charles merely grunted, eyes never leaving his tablet where he scrolled through golf equipment. Patricia's irritation deepened. She hadn't campaigned for HOA presidency to be ignored. After 15 years in corporate marketing, before becoming a full-time homemaker, Patricia understood image management. Oakwood Estates was marketed as an exclusive community with curated landscapes, language she herself had helped craft when serving on the development company's branding committee. "Something has to be done," she muttered, reaching for her leather-bound copy of the HOA regulations, a document she had personally expanded from 30 pages to 147 during her tenure on the board. She began highlighting sections that might apply to Marcus's garden. Section 7.2, No vegetation exceeding ornamental purposes. Amendment 12B, Structures must maintain aesthetic harmony. Addendum 19, Garden implements must be stored out of street view. The following morning, Patricia meticulously photographed Marcus's garden from multiple angles with her smartphone, paying particular attention to a cucumber vine that had dared to extend slightly beyond its designated trellis. She created a digital folder labeled Chen Violations and synchronized it to her cloud account. When Marcus left for work, she walked the perimeter of his property, measuring the height of his tomato plants with a retractable tape measure and noting each one that exceeded the arbitrary 48-inch maximum height she had recently added to the regulations, but had yet to distribute to homeowners. "Just wait until the quarterly inspection," she whispered to herself, a smile spreading across her face as she imagined the violation notices she would issue. This garden experiment will be finished before harvest time. With his formulas perfected, Marcus needed to test their efficacy in controlled conditions before deploying them in the neighborhood. He converted his garage into a temporary field laboratory, installing grow lights and a small array of Patricia's beloved boxwood shrubs purchased from the same nursery she used. The plants thrived under his careful attention, unaware of their role in his elegant revenge scheme. On a Wednesday evening, Marcus invited Dr. Eleanor Rivera, his department head at BioNature Labs, for dinner. After serving her his signature stir-fry, made with store-bought vegetables that paled in comparison to his stolen harvest. He cautiously broached the subject. "Eleanor, I'm working on a side project involving targeted pheromone dispersal in suburban environments. Purely theoretical, of course." He refilled her wine glass. "I could use a second opinion on the environmental impact assessment." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. In 15 years of working together, she had never known Marcus to pursue theoretical research. "Does this have something to do with your garden? Jim mentioned there was some trouble with your HOA." Marcus sighed. News traveled quickly in small communities. "Let's just say I'm exploring how plant defense mechanisms might function in non-agricultural settings." Eleanor leaned forward. "Show me what you're working on." In the garage laboratory, Eleanor moved methodically between Marcus's experimental stations, examining his notes and the molecular models displayed on his tablet. Her expression shifted from skepticism to admiration. "This compound," she pointed to his ladybug attractant formula, "it's brilliant. The specificity is remarkable." She studied the chemical structure. No impact on bees or butterflies, just coccinellida, and completely harmless to the insects themselves. She turned to him. "This could revolutionize organic pest control if scaled properly." "And the environmental persistence?" Marcus asked, trying to sound casual. Eleanor checked his degradation studies. 3 to 4 weeks in standard conditions, breaking down into completely benign components. She raised an eyebrow. "Perfect for a controlled demonstration without long-term ecological disruption." As she examined his boxwood stress inducer, her professional demeanor cracked slightly. "This is mischievous, Marcus. Temporary, but highly effective." A small smile played at her lips. "Hypothetically speaking, whoever was targeted by this would have a very sticky, pollen-heavy situation on their hands. Impossible to trace, completely natural in appearance." Before leaving, Eleanor paused at the door. "Your research is sound, and there are no environmental or health concerns." She fixed him with a knowing look. "But Marcus, whatever you're planning, make sure it's proportionate to the offense." After Eleanor's visit, Marcus fine-tuned his formulations, perfecting their delivery mechanisms. He designed simple, biodegradable dispensers that resembled ordinary plant fertilizer stakes, easily inserted into soil, where they would slowly release his compounds according to a precise timetable. In his notebook, he mapped the neighborhood's microclimate patterns, calculating wind directions and insect migration corridors. Every aspect was meticulously planned: application points, dispersal rates, even backup strategies if weather patterns shifted unexpectedly. The final piece came together when the HOA announced their annual Community Beautification Weekend, a perfect opportunity to implement his plan under the guise of civic participation. Patricia had personally spearheaded the initiative, mandating that each homeowner contribute to enhancing community aesthetics. The night before the event, Marcus sat in his empty garden, contemplating the scientific elegance of his revenge. Nature itself would be his ally. No laws broken, no direct confrontation necessary. Just the elegant application of botanical knowledge against someone who had underestimated both him and the complex natural systems she sought to control. "Science requires precision," he murmured, carefully packing his specially designed planting tools. "And patience." He gently placed his component dispensers into labeled compartments in a gardening caddy, each one designed to blend perfectly with standard landscaping equipment. Tomorrow, Operation Pollination would begin. The butterfly effect, both literal and metaphorical, transformed Oakwood Estates over the following days. Local news coverage expanded as the butterfly phenomenon intensified, with morning show hosts broadcasting live from the neighborhood entrance. "Scientists are baffled by this unprecedented gathering," reported a perky journalist as monarch butterflies landed on her microphone. Patricia had no choice but to paste on a smile for the cameras while inwardly seething. The attention brought unexpected consequences. Tourism increased as butterfly enthusiasts arrived with cameras and notebooks. Cars lined the streets, their occupants wandering through the neighborhood with binoculars and identification guides. A famous wildlife photographer set up equipment, directly across from Patricia's driveway, explaining politely but firmly that he was documenting a rare ecological event from public property. Patricia's attempts to manage the situation backfired spectacularly. When she called a community meeting to discuss the insect problem, the conference room at the local library overflowed with enthusiastic neighbors wearing butterfly-themed clothing. The elementary school principal announced a field trip to observe what teachers were calling a living science lesson. 3 environmental conservation groups offered to designate Oakwood Estates an official pollinator sanctuary, complete with commemorative plaques. "This is absolutely intentional," Patricia hissed to her increasingly distant allies on the HOA board as they watched children running joyfully through clouds of butterflies outside her living room window. "Someone is doing this to undermine property values." Board member Diane Wheeler, who had once been Patricia's staunchest supporter, adjusted her new butterfly pattern scarf. "Actually, the real estate agents said interest in the neighborhood has increased 12% since the butterflies arrived. The Thompson house sold for $20,000 over asking price yesterday." The ladybug invasion proved even more difficult to combat. Unlike the butterflies, which dispersed at night, the ladybugs formed dense, glistening clusters on vertical surfaces, particularly those around Patricia's home. Her white exterior walls displayed constantly shifting patterns of red and black, like living murals that rearranged themselves hourly. Professional photographers arrived to capture the phenomenon, setting up tripods along her property line. Patricia's expensive landscaping suffered most dramatically. Her perfectly trimmed boxwoods now produced so much pollen that the weekly maintenance crew refused to service them without protective gear. "Never seen anything like it," explained the crew supervisor, sneezing violently despite his mask. "It's like they're fighting back against being shaped." The plants, responding to the stress pheromones, had accelerated their growth patterns, requiring trimming every 3 days instead of bi-weekly. Each cutting released more pollen, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. The final indignity came when Patricia hosted the monthly meeting of the Oakwood Ladies Auxiliary. As her guests sipped mimosas on her patio, a gentle breeze carried a cloud of yellow pollen across the gathering, coating the delicate pastries and floating in the champagne flutes. When Patricia retreated indoors with her guests, they discovered that the fine powder had infiltrated the house despite closed windows, settling on the imported silk throw pillows and Belgian lace tablecloths. Marjorie Blackwell, the auxiliary president, dabbed yellow stains from her white linen blazer. "Perhaps we should consider moving our meetings to the community center until this situation resolves itself." She gestured to the window where ladybugs formed a perfect heart shape on the glass, as if mocking Patricia's discomfort. That evening, Patricia stood alone in her shower, watching yellow rivulets swirl down the drain as she washed pollen from her hair for the 3rd time that day. Through the bathroom window, she could hear neighborhood children counting ladybugs in her front yard, their laughter a sharp contrast to her growing isolation. For the first time since moving to Oakwood Estates, Patricia felt powerless, a sensation she was entirely unequipped to handle. The exodus of the Winters family from Oakwood Estates became something of a neighborhood spectacle. Moving company employees worked double time, rushing to load furniture that mysteriously acquired fresh yellow pollen despite being wrapped in protective coverings. Patricia supervised with increasing hysteria, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled, her designer outfit replaced by practical clothing and a wide-brimmed hat that failed to fully shield her from the butterfly clouds that followed her movements. Charles, who had remained largely invisible during Patricia's HOA reign, emerged as surprisingly diplomatic during their departure. He circulated among neighbors with handshakes and quiet apologies, distributing business cards for his law practice with an almost desperate eagerness. When moving to Lakeside Villas, he explained to anyone who would listen, "No gardens there, just golf courses." Marcus observed the moving process from a respectful distance, meticulously noting each piece of furniture as it emerged from the house. When Patricia's prized china cabinet, the one she showcased during HOA home inspections to demonstrate proper interior aesthetics, was loaded onto the truck, he allowed himself a small smile. The ecosystem he'd created had done its work perfectly. each element performing exactly as his research had predicted. On moving day's afternoon, as the last boxes were being loaded, Marcus approached the property with his carefully wrapped parting gift. Patricia saw him coming and visibly stiffened, her hand automatically reaching for a clipboard that was no longer there. "Mr. Chen," she acknowledged, her voice strained. A ladybug landed on her sleeve, and she resisted the urge to brush it away while cameras from the local news station filmed nearby. "Mrs. Winters," Marcus replied, his tone neutral. "I wanted to offer a traditional garden farewell." He presented the small potted mint plant, its bright green leaves vibrant against the terracotta container. Patricia accepted it with visible reluctance. "How? Thoughtful. Mint is remarkably resilient," Marcus explained, loud enough for the hovering reporters to hear. "It thrives in almost any condition and spreads quite enthusiastically." He handed her a small envelope. "Care instructions," including the scientific explanation of why mint can never truly be removed once established. "The rhizome system is fascinating." As she processed his words, understanding dawned in Patricia's eyes. The gift wasn't just a plant, it was a message. Marcus had orchestrated everything, the butterflies, the ladybugs, the pollen, with scientific precision. And now he was giving her something that would potentially invade her new garden the way she had invaded his. For a brief moment, their eyes met in perfect understanding. Patricia opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to threaten or accuse, but closed it again. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't sound paranoid or vindictive to the watching neighbors. Marcus had outmaneuvered her completely, using nature itself as his ally. "I do hope you'll find lakeside villas more compatible with your lifestyle," Marcus said pleasantly. "I understand they have very strict rules about landscaping." He glanced at the mint plant. "That should do well on your patio. I selected a variety that's particularly vigorous." That evening, as twilight settled over Oakwood Estates, the neighbors gathered for an impromptu celebration in the community green space. Mrs. Finch produced homemade lemonade, and others brought snacks to share. Children chased the last butterflies of the day, while parents discussed plans for the newly approved community garden. Marcus sat quietly on the periphery, watching as Oakwood Estates transformed from Patricia's controlled domain into something organic and communal. Tomorrow, he would begin replanting his vegetable garden, perhaps expanding it to include some of the rare varieties that Carmen from the food bank had saved for him. As neighbors drifted away in the gathering darkness, Jim, the elderly neighbor with the security camera, settled beside Marcus on the bench. "Nice work, son," he said quietly, looking toward the Winters' now empty house, where a single ladybug lingered on the for sale sign. "Never seen a more fitting case of natural justice." Marcus smiled, but said nothing. The garden would speak for itself in time. As he left the food bank, Marcus's phone chimed with a neighborhood alert. Patricia was hosting an emergency HOA meeting that evening to discuss escalating landscape violations threatening property values. The message included photos of his garden, taken before the theft, with red circles highlighting each violation. Sitting in his car, Marcus zoomed in on one of the photos. Patricia had managed to capture him in the background, tending to his plants with obvious affection. His face in the image reflected pure joy, a stark contrast to how he felt now. This wasn't just about vegetables anymore. This was personal. The small garden shed at the corner of his yard housed a weather station connected to his smartphone, allowing him to track microclimate patterns with scientific precision. Next to his gardening tools hung detailed charts tracking germination rates, growth patterns, and yield quantities for each plant variety. Some neighbors joked that Marcus's garden had better documentation than their children's medical records. Last spring, when the city had faced water restrictions during a brief drought, Marcus had unveiled his rainwater collection system, 4 artfully disguised barrels connected to his home's gutters, storing enough water to sustain his garden through 3 rainless weeks. The HOA had initially objected until Marcus presented research showing how his system reduced runoff into the neighborhood's problematic drainage areas. Gardening isn't just about growing food, Marcus often told visitors who admired his perfectly maintained beds. It's about relationship with the land. Everything we take, we must give back. This philosophy explained the three-bin composting system, hidden behind trellises of flowering jasmine, where kitchen scraps and garden waste transformed into rich, black soil that smelled of fertility and promise. Patricia observed these interactions with mounting frustration. Her husband, Charles, a corporate attorney who spent most weekends golfing, had long ago learned to nod without listening when she complained about neighborhood infractions. "Can't you see what's happening?" she demanded one evening, pointing through their dining room window at Marcus's yard, where several neighbors had gathered to admire a particularly successful watermelon vine. "He's turning this neighborhood into a commune. Property values will plummet if everyone starts growing food like farmers." Charles merely grunted, eyes never leaving his tablet where he scrolled through golf equipment. Patricia's irritation deepened. She hadn't campaigned for HOA presidency to be ignored. After 15 years in corporate marketing, before becoming a full-time homemaker, Patricia understood image management. Oakwood Estates was marketed as an exclusive community with curated landscapes, language she herself had helped craft when serving on the development company's branding committee. "Something has to be done," she muttered, reaching for her leather-bound copy of the HOA regulations, a document she had personally Marcus stood motionless in his ravaged garden, the violation notice trembling in his hand. The fine wasn't what bothered him. It was the calculated violation of his space, the theft not just of produce, but of months of care and attention. The security footage from Jim's camera continued to play on his phone, showing Patricia directing her accomplices with military precision as they stripped his garden bare. Section 5, Paragraph 3. Patricia's voice rang clearly through the phone speaker as she pointed to his prized San Marzano tomatoes. "And make sure you get every last one. No exceptions." The committee members, Brenda Wilson from 3 doors down and Doug Hoffman from the cul-de-sac, looked increasingly uncomfortable as the harvesting continued. When Brenda suggested leaving the smaller tomatoes, Patricia's response was immediate and sharp. "The regulation says no excessive growth. If we leave any, we're not enforcing the rules consistently." She consulted her clipboard. "And don't forget those disgusting pepper things, all of them." Marcus paused the video, unable to watch anymore. He walked slowly through his garden, touching the empty vines where his vegetables had hung just days before. Near the cucumber trellis, he found a small fabric scrap caught on the wire, expensive linen from Patricia's signature gardening outfit. The evidence of her presence in his sanctuary felt like salt in an open wound. His phone buzzed with a text from Carmen, the food bank coordinator. "Marcus, did you make a donation?" A woman dropped off a huge amount of produce saying it was from Oakwood Estates. "Some of the most beautiful vegetables we've ever received." He didn't reply. Instead, he sank onto the small bench tucked beneath his apple espalier, the only part of his garden Patricia hadn't touched. The bench had been his first garden project, built from reclaimed cedar with growth takes time, carved into the backslat. The irony wasn't lost on him. The next morning, Marcus found himself parked across from Second Harvest Food Bank an hour before they opened. As volunteers arrived to prepare for the day, he recognized Carmen's compact figure approaching the entrance. Her face brightened when she saw him. "Marcus, I wanted to thank you for..." Her smile faltered when she saw his expression. "That wasn't your donation, was it?" "May I see what was brought in?" he asked quietly. In the food bank's walk-in cooler, Marcus moved silently between crates of his harvested vegetables. He recognized each variety, could almost identify which plant each tomato had come from. Carmen watched as he gently touched a particularly beautiful striped eggplant. "I grew these from seeds I brought back from my grandmother's village in China," he explained, voice barely above a whisper. "This variety doesn't exist in American seed catalogs." Carmen's expression hardened. That woman said she was doing community beautification. She even wanted a larger receipt for tax purposes. "Did you give it to her?" "No." Something felt off. Carmen hesitated. "The volunteers have already sorted everything for distribution today. Many families are counting on this fresh produce." Marcus looked at the vegetables one last time, then straightened his shoulders. "Let them have it. That's what gardens are for, feeding people." He managed a small smile. "Just save me a few seeds from that eggplant."